All right. Let's see here. So I'm back at it again. Let's see. I meant to start this reading like literally 2 hours ago and have continuously been distracted by a variety of things I did not expect to pull me away from the task at hand. As is the case, as is my life. Um, anyway, not gonna dwell on that. We've got Marxist literature to read. This is a pretty big one. I've heard about State and Revolution for a long time, though I've never read it, of course. Otherwise, I don't think I'd be reading it right now. Maybe that's not true. I might still be reading it right now, but I haven't read it before. Once again, for anyone who doesn't understand why I'm doing anyone who is watching this, I will explain. I have a hard time focusing on tasks that I set for myself, and this was a trick I discovered that helps me stay focused on what I'm trying to do, which is acting as though I am reading to someone, as though I'm talking to someone, as though I am engaging with another person, which helps me stay oriented towards what it is that I am doing. Also, here's a big thing. If you're talking to someone, if you're engaging with another person, unless you're a total shithead, or I should say, unless you're pretty rude, which is maybe not a total shithead, but if you're rude and inconsiderate, you might go on your phone or do something else or pick your nose or something, and then you won't be and disengage from the person you're talking to. But for me, I don't do that. I give other people my full attention, or I try my damnedest to. And so I once again acting as though the anonymous possible potential viewer is like a real person. I stay engaged with the sort of activity with which I am involving the other in, right? And that is reading. So I'm staying on task. That's my explanation for how all this works. I just made that up right now, honestly. I'm just coming up with stuff as we go. I haven't thought this out very well beforehand. I rarely think things out very well beforehand. I just sort of do things. But so once again, so just going back to the point I was trying to make. If this seems like it's weird and it's not a good audio book version or just a reading of this text, it's because it's not trying to be. This is just me trying to get shit done. So if you're looking for a good audiobook version of this text, I guarantee you can find something out there. Click off this video. In fact, I encourage people not to watch this. I know there's a few people that found this and could be watching at some point. And I have to try to pretend or not pretend, I have to try to just ignore that possibility, which is ironic because that's literally the possibility I needed for this to work in the first place. So I don't know what I'm doing. But Anyway, there's better stuff you could be watching than me trying to read this. Like seriously. And look how distracted I've been just trying to get started. Anyway, enough of that. I need to get on to it. So, this is Vladimir Lenin's The State and Revolution. The Marxist theory of the state and the task of the proletariat in the revolution. Very interesting. What an exciting subtitle. Let's see. Habloop. Preface is not long. So this is the preface. The question of the state is now acquiring particular importance in theory and in practical politics. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me again. Okay, let me just start over. That was too many burps in a row to just go on like that. The question of the state is now acquiring particular importance both in theory and in practical politics. The imperialist war has immensely accelerated and intensified the process of transformation of monopoly capitalism into state monopoly capitalism. The monstrous oppression of the working people by the state, which is merging more and more with the all-powerful capitalist associations, is becoming increasingly monstrous. The advanced countries, we mean their hinterland, are becoming military convict prisons for the workers. Yeah, I see. The unprecedented horrors and miseries of the protracted war are making the people's position unbearable and increasing their anger. The world proletarian revolution is clearly maturing. The question of its relation to the state is acquiring practical importance. The elements of opportunism that accumulated over the decades of comparatively peaceful development have given rise to the trend of social chauvinism, which dominated the official socialist parties throughout the world. This trend, let me reread that for a second. The elements of opportunism that accumulated over the decades of comparatively peaceful development have given rise to the trend of social chauvinism, which dominated the official socialist parties throughout the world. This trend, socialism in words and chauvinism in deeds, bunch of names. Oh, that's a lot of names. This trend, socialism in words and chauvinism in deeds, is conspicuous for the base, servile adaptation of the leaders of socialism to the interests not only of their national bourgeoisie, but of their state. For the majority of the so-called great powers have long been exploited and enslaving a whole number of small and weak nations, and the imperialist war is a war for the division and redivision of this kind of booty. The struggle to free the working people from the influence of the bourgeoisie in general and of the imperialist bourgeoisie in particular is impossible without a struggle against opportunist prejudices concerning the state. First of all, we examine the theory of Marx and Engels of the state. We examine the theory of Marx and Engels of the state. Is that just bad translation or what? Because that is an awful sounding sentence, in my opinion. First of all, we examine the theory of Marx and Engels of the state. I guess maybe it can't be helped, but, like, first of all, we examine the theory of Marx and Engels of there's something about that of. The repetition of here just doesn't, like, sometimes a word repeats several times, in a short phrase, and it can kind of have an accelerant effect to the affective charge that I think is generated through the utterance. But in this case, it feels like, at least to me, a little bit of a stumble, not something that really, like, kind of, increases the, sense of, like, oomph of the sentence. Obviously, that's like a stylistic choice. It's not like the sentence isn't valid or something like that, but something about it to me just does not sound quite as nice as I would like it to sound if I was writing this, but whatever. And I don't blame Lenin. This is he didn't write this in English. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Lenin was a good writer, but hard to know. You never really know if someone in another language is a good writer because you're only ever reading it in your language, right? So, hmm. I'm convinced Nietzsche was a genius in terms of writing talent, though. I am convinced of that. I think Nietzsche had genuine talent with the German language, and you can see it in English. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. Um, First of all, we examine the theory of Marx and Engels of the state. Maybe I'm just reading it weird. Okay, I'll just not focus on that. And dwell in particular detail on those aspects of this theory that are ignored or have been distorted by the opportunists. When we deal especially with the one who is chiefly responsible for these distortions, Karl Kautsky, the best-known leader of the Second International, which has met with such miserable bankruptcy in the present war. Lastly, we sum up the main results of the experience of the Russian revolutions of 1905 and particularly of 1917. Apparently, the latter is now early August 1917, completing the first stage of its development. But this revolution as a whole can only be understood as a link in a chain of socialist proletarian revolutions being caused by the imperialist war. The question of the relation of the socialist proletarian revolution to the state, therefore, is acquiring not only practical political importance, but also the significance of a most urgent problem of the day, the problem of explaining to the masses that they will have to do before long what they will have to do before long to free themselves from capitalist tyranny. Okay. The burps keep coming. And then the yawn. It's never ending. It is a never ending. It is a never ending stream of gases going in and coming out all the time. Oh, to have a body. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but god damn, is it weird. Okay. I just looked at my squid and I'm like, No. I'll let them rest on the bed. Let's see here. So, chapter 1, the state, a product of the irreconcilability of class antagonisms. See, all right. So actually, I was doing a hike up to a cross on a mountain, which sounds that's a whole other thing. But during that hike, I actually listened to a good chunk of this in audio form from a real, a real um, audio reading making person who took it seriously. Um, and I was listening to this, and I actually thought that it was a very interesting basic idea here, right? That this notion of that the state is a product of the irreconcilability of class antagonisms, that the very idea of putting the state into the service of mediating the relationship between classes and of alleviating um, the oppressive effects of class antagonism is basically not possible on some level, or is like not how the state works, in the sense that the state is already the product of the irreconcilability, as the heading of this chapter says, of class antagonisms, and that the amelioration of um, like class antagonism, that like the apparent amelioration of class antagonism by the state ultimately is nothing other than the suppression of the awareness and or the like, I guess, yeah, I think some of it. Maybe I have it wrong. I mean, I'm gonna read it right now, so I'm gonna see what I can catch in there, right? What I didn't catch when I was listening to it, but that that any amelioration of any apparent amelioration of class antagonism or of class oppression is through the state ultimately is just a form of suppressing the the apparent oppression or the appearance of oppression of the capitalist class that gets onto the proletariat. So it just hides the oppression by the dominant class. It suppresses the oppressive conditions of the lower class. Um, and because its very existence is a product of the inability to overcome that antagonism. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm going off, but that's what I got when I was listening to this. I totally forgot about that until I saw this title, and I'm glad, because I thought that was cool. I thought, that is interesting. That is an interesting thought. It's a very interesting thought too when you think about the way that there's a lot of different what's it called? There's a lot of, if you talk about stuff like class antagonism or oppression in terms of like class conflict in like liberal academic spaces, you're going to hear people talking about the way that this sort of turns into like a problem, say, of like policy and legislation and how you would vote or how you would deal with things legally. But the problem ultimately, right, if this notion presented here is correct, or if the way that I'm understanding it, this basic idea is correct, what it would imply is that any talk about amelioration to the state is ultimately going to turn into something, or ultimately becomes, or is in the final account, never like up to the task of its supposed aim. Like it's not possible. But anyway, which like provides a good strong counter argument potentially. under the like, if it's, like, used right, towards those who would, make the state as the primary apparatus through which we could reconcile class antagonism or, overcome various forms of, oppression and domination. But yeah, I find that interesting. I really wanna just I really wanna get some peanut butter, so I know I barely started the first chapter. I will be back. I really wanna get some peanut butter. Just bear with I mean, you don't have to bear with me. Hopefully, no one's even watching. But anyway. turned. I don't know what it is, but I swear to God, I swear something makes my eyebrows look angry. Can I just look? Is it my mouth? If I go, do I have to like really raise my eyebrows so they stop looking they're looking serious? I have crooked eyebrows. Oh man, my fucking eyebrows are not good looking. They've got some problems. But whatever. One day when I stop being entirely consumed by like an onslaught of like immediate random things, and I make the time to figure it out, I will fix my eyebrows one day. People say live in the moment. Honestly, I say I simultaneously live too much in the moment at the same time as I live far too much in the past and present. Like I don't feel like live in the moment. Like I feel like there are like what's it called? Caveats to that phrase. Because there are ways to live in the moment that I think are just entirely devoid of any real meaning or substance. But just getting distracted again. Let's get back onto task. I keep staring. I keep going back to look at my to look at me before then moving back to the writing. I've got my two screens right here. This one is the reading. This one is the like video. And it's also got like this huge ass fucking like blank spot for chat. And there's never gonna be any chat on my videos. Never. Hopefully. But anyways. I keep checking my face though. I'm like, do I look good? Is this a good angle? Or does this angle make my like line right here make pop? Yeah, I don't know. I'm tired. I am tired. I've literally barely, oh my God. Okay. It says 30 minutes in. I only really read for like 13. Okay, let's try to at least get chapter 1 done tonight. Let's do this. What is now happening to Marx's theory has, in the course of history, happened repeatedly to the theories of revolutionary thinkers and leaders of oppressed classes fighting for emancipation. During the lifetime of great revolutionaries, the oppressing classes constantly hounded them, received their theories with the most savage malice, the most furious hatred, and the most unscrupulous campaigns of lies and slander. After their death, attempts are made to convert them into harmless icons, to canonize them, so to say, and to hallow their names to a certain extent for the consolation of the oppressed classes, with the object of duping the latter, while at the same time robbing the revolutionary theory of its substance, blunting its revolutionary edge, and vulgarizing it. Today, the bourgeoisie and the opportunists within the labor movement concur in this doctoring of Marxism. They omit, obscure, and distort the revolutionary side of this theory, its revolutionary soul. They push to the foreground and extol what it is or seems acceptable to the bourgeoisie. All the social chauvinists are now Marxists. Don't laugh. I'm sorry, I can't. All the social chauvinists are now Marxists. I'm not laughing because all the social chauvinists are Marxists. I'm laughing because it says don't laugh. And more frequently, German bourgeois scholars, only yesterday specialists in the annihilation of Marxism, are speaking of the national German Marx, who they claim educated the labor unions, which so splendidly organized for the purpose of waging a predatory war. In these circumstances, in view of the unprecedentedly widespread distortion of Marxism, our prime task is to reestablish that what Marx really taught on the subject of the state. And this will necessitate a long number of long quotations from the works of Marx and Engels themselves. Of course, long quotations will render the text cumbersome and will not help to make it popular reading, but we cannot possibly dispense with them. All, or at any rate, all of the most essential passages in the works of Marx and Engels on the subject of the state must by all means be quoted as fully as possible, so that the reader may form an independent opinion of the totality of the views of the founders of scientific socialism and of the evolution of those views, and so that their distortion by the Kautskyism now prevailing may be documentarily proved and clearly demonstrated. Let us begin with the most popular of Engels' works, The Origin of the Family, Private Property and the State, 6th edition, of which was published in Stuttgart as far back as 1856. We have to translate the quotations from the German originals as the Russian translations, while very numerous, are for the most part either incomplete or very unsatisfactory. I actually first read this piece because I had an English teacher in my community college classes who had us read this in order to, as like an intro to like Marxist critical reading of a text, like to understand a little bit about like class antagonism and how you talk about that and how you would apply that to like watching a movie or reading a book or a story or something. And honestly, I'm not sure if that was like really great. But it was cool. It was cool to be exposed to a little bit of that in that way. I mean, I was already pretty sold on a lot of leftist ideas, so I was just like, cool. I'm sorry for how much I keep showing my mouth. Anyway, let's see here. I feel I raised my eyebrows there because like around a lot of the people I know, the moment there is an opportunity to make some kind of a sexual joke, people go for it. or to imply, like that's what she said, except more clever than that. They go for it. And I feel like that's one of those moments because I have a habit of walking right into those. Oh my god. But anyway, out of coffee. But I'm not gonna leave. I need to keep going. Um, where was I? Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Whew. Okay. You know what's crazy? I zone out like that sometimes in the middle of people talking, and it is the most frustrating thing in the world. I mean, it's a little bit better when I was taking medication, but like, yeah, it's really frustrating because I'll like people will be in the middle of talking to me, and then I'll just kind of be like, "What are you saying? What's happening? What's going on?" I just got lost for a second in my own thoughts. Or just like I don't know, I zone out. It's weird. Um, ah, okay. Oh my god, I can't believe how distracted I am right now, or how distractible I am right now. Okay, summing up his historical analysis, Engels says the state is therefore by no means a power forced on society from without, as just as little is it the reality of the ethical idea. The state is therefore by no means a power forced on society from without, just as little as just as little is it the reality of the ethical idea, the image and reality of reason, as Hegel maintains. Rather, it is a product of society at a certain stage of development. It is the admission that this society has become entangled in an absolute contradiction with itself, that it has split into irreconcilable antagonisms which it is powerless to dispel. But in order that these antagonisms, these classes with conflicting economic interests, might not consume themselves and society in fruitless struggle, it became necessary to have a power seemingly standing above society that would alleviate the conflict and keep it within the bounds of order. And this power, arisen out of society but placing itself above it and alienating itself more and more from it, is the state. So, just as a note, I really want to kind of come back to this part at the beginning here that I think is kind of interesting. So, uh, for for Hegel, apparently, because like I have not read Philosophy of Right. Um, or right, no, I did read some of Philosophy of Right, or some of something, and like I'm pretty sure we talked about this state a little, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I don't remember anything. My whole life is just a vague daydream. Um, the point being here. So apparently for Hegel, according to Engels, the state is the reality of the ethical idea, the image and reality of reason, but rather Engels wants to say is that it is the admission that this society has become entangled in an insoluble contradiction with itself, that it has split into irreconcilable antagonisms which it is powerless to dispel. But in order that these antagonisms might not consume themselves in society for the struggle, it became necessary to have a power seemingly standing above. Okay, so interesting. So, but I mean, that says something like, I wonder if what Hegel, the way that Hegel is characterized by Engels, I wonder if that can be reconciled with the way, with the state as a product of internal contradiction in society, of class struggle. Like, I wonder if there is some reconciling between Hegel's conception of it and this way that Engels is conceiving of it. If one considers contradiction and irreconcilability as something which can also emerge through reason, which, reason in history, right? And there we get to, like, I think the notion of, like, spirit in Hegel or something. Spirit of the age, right? Yeah, I don't know. Interesting question. Maybe that's something I could bring up in the reading group I'm in. Man, I really feel bad for anyone that stumbles onto this and doesn't listen to my warning at the beginning. You know what? No, because if someone like, listen to me tell them that this is not a good video for them to watch, if they just want an audio version of the text. If someone listened to me say that and they understand that, then they wouldn't be watching right now. They would be doing something better with their lives for them. If somehow someone considers watching me right now to be the best thing they could be doing with their lives at this moment, honestly, I don't know what to think about that. I don't know what to think about that. But, like, clearly it's not a mistake. If they're at this point in the video, they're not here by a mistake. Anyways. Okay. This expresses with perfect clarity the basic idea of Marxism with regard to the historical role and the meaning of the state. The state is a product and a manifestation of the irreconcilability of class antagonisms. The state arises where, when, and insofar as class antagonism objectively cannot be reconciled. Okay, the state arises where, when, and insofar as class antagonism objectively cannot be reconciled. And conversely, the existence of the state proves that the class antagonisms are irreconcilable. It is on this most important and fundamental point that the distortion of Marxism proceeds along two main lines. Begins. Yeah, and that makes sense, right? The idea of the state withering away, right, makes perfect sense if this is what we understand the state to be, right? Because if we were to dissolve class antagonism, then there would be no need for a mediation. If we were to dissolve the class structure and class antagonism with it, there would be no need. I don't know. I am not a puppetry. I'm not a puppeteer. Or else I would make this fit with the opening and closing I'll stop. Um, oh, where was I? God damn it. Um, I was suddenly overcome with the desire to put this cap in my mouth. This is another really good example where someone would have made some kind of a comment right there. I really want to. Anyway, it's on this most important and fundamental point that the distortions of Marxism proceed along two main lines begins. On the one hand, the bourgeoisie. No! On the one hand, the bourgeois. I think that's bourgeois, but I think it's supposed to be bourgeoisie. On the one hand, the bourgeois, and particularly the petty bourgeois, ideologists compelled under the weight of indisputable historical facts to admit that the state only exists where there are class antagonisms and class struggle. Correct, Marx, in such a way as to make it appear correct, Marx, in such a way as to make it appear that the state is an organ for the reconciliation of classes. According to Marx, the state could neither have arisen nor maintained itself had it been possible to reconcile classes. From what the petty bourgeois and Philistine professors and publicists say, with quite frequent and benevolent references to Marx, it appears that the state does not reconcile classes. According to Marx, the state is an organ of class rule, an organ for the oppression of one class by another. It is the creation of order which legalizes and perpetuates this oppression by moderating the conflict between classes. In the opinion of the petty bourgeois politicians, however, order means the reconciliation of classes, and not the oppression of one class by another. To alleviate the conflict means reconciling classes and not depriving the oppressed class of definite means and methods of struggle to overthrow the oppressors. Right. Okay, after going over that a few times in my head, I've made more sense out of what's going on there. For instance, when in the Revolution of 1917, the question of the significance of the role of the state arose in all its magnitude as a practical question demanding immediate action, moreover, action on a mass scale, all of the social revolutionaries and Mensheviks descended at once to the petty bourgeois theory that the state reconciles classes. Innumerable resolutions and by politicians of both these parties are thoroughly saturated with this petty bourgeois and Philistine reconciliation theory that the state is an organ of the rule of a definite class which cannot be reconciled with its antipode, class opposite to it, is something the petty bourgeois Democrats will never be able to understand. Their attitude to the state is one of the most striking manifestations of the fact that our socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks are not socialists at all. A point that we Bolsheviks have always maintained. But petty bourgeois Democrats using near socialist phraseology. On the other on the other hand, Kautskyite the Kautskyite distortion of Marxism is far more subtle. Theoretically, it is not denied that the state is an organ of class rule or that class antagonisms are irreconcilable. But what is overlooked or glossed over in this, if the state is a product of the irreconcilability of class antagonisms, if it is a power standing above society and alienating itself more and more from it, it is clear that the liberation of the oppressed class is impossible, not only without a violent revolution, but also without. Hold on. But what is overlooked or glossed over is this. Wait, hold on. Yeah. Yeah. But what is overlooked or glossed over is this. If the state is a product of the irreconcilability of class antagonisms, if it is a power standing above society and alienating itself more and more from it, it is clear that the liberation of the oppressed class is impossible, not only without a violent revolution, but also without the destruction of the apparatus of the state power, which was created by the ruling class, and which is the embodiment of this alienation. As we shall see later, Marx very explicitly drew this theoretically self-evident conclusion on the strength of a concrete historical analysis of the tasks of the revolution. And as we shall show in detail further on, it is this conclusion that Kautsky has forgotten and distorted. Hmm. Engels continues, as distinct from the old Gentile tribal or clan order, the state first divides its subjects according to territory. This division seems natural to us, but it costs a prolonged struggle against the old organization according to generations or tribes. The second distinguishing feature is the establishment of a public power which no longer directly coincides with the population organizing itself as an armed force. This special public power is necessary because a self-acting armed organization of the population has become impossible since the split into classes. This public power exists in every state. It consists not merely of armed men, but also of material adjuncts, prisons, and institutions of coercion of all kinds, of which Gentile, clan, society knew nothing. Engels elucidates the concept of the power, which is called the state, a power which arose from society but places itself above it and alienates itself more and more from it. What does this power mainly consist of? It consists of special bodies of armed men having prisons, etc., at their command. We are justified in speaking of special bodies of armed men because the public power, which is an attribute of every state, does not directly coincide with the armed population, with its self-acting armed organization. Wait, what? What does that say? Hold on here. We are justified in speaking of special bodies of armed men because the public power, which is an attribute of every state, does not directly coincide with the armed population, with its self-acting armed organization. Okay, yes. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, I get it. I get it. I get it. Understood. You're just trying to see. So what it's getting at is the idea that public power, which is attributed to every state, does not directly coincide with the armed population. So the public power, like the armed forces of a state, do not necessarily coincide with the armed population as such. It is a particular, special, a special portion of the population dedicated to serving the state as a means of violent force. I guess that's a way of putting it. A means of coercion. It is not merely the that portion of the population which has the capacity for force, violence, and coercive acts, but is a very, very particular or special portion of the population specifically put aside for the service for such acts in the service of the state. I hate myself so much right now. Okay. Why do I do this? Why am I like this? Okay, moving on. You know, one time, you want to know how fucking bad I am sometimes with like my impulsivity? One time, I was hanging out with one time I was a kid, right? And I went to the lunch table and I saw a kid sitting right next to me. And I swear to God, I thought it was my best friend. Now, me and my best friend are wacky, you know, we were wacky. We were goofy, and we would be goofy with each other, and we would be, like, very silly. Very, very silly. And I do this thing where I'm like, I'm eating a burger or some shit, like, you know, school cafeteria burger. And I do stupid kid, not pretty things, you know? I'm, like, chewing it with my mouth open. I'm like, "Ah, blah, blah." And I turn to this kid and I'm like, "Oh," I do this thing. I had no fucking clue who that kid was. I didn't check to make sure. He looked like my friend. I just went for it. I will never forget that. That is one among the many embarrassing situations in my life that every once in a while I am like struck by. Two things that hit me once in a while in the quiet moments of my life when I have time to reflect. Do you know what comes up sometimes? The regrets and embarrassments of my life. Ah, man. Of which there are many, of course. Of which there are many. Okay. From the viewpoint of the vast majority of Europeans of the end of the 19th century, whom Engels was addressing, and who had not gone through or closely observed a single great revolution, it could not have been otherwise. They could not understand at all what a self-acting armed organization of the population was. When asked why it became necessary to have special bodies of armed men placed above society and alienating themselves from it, police and a standing army, the West European and Russian Philistines were inclined to utter a few phrases borrowed from Spencer or Mikhailovsky to refer to the growing complexity of social life, the differentiation of functions, and so on. Such a reference seems scientific and effectively lulls the ordinary person to sleep by obscuring the important and basic fact, namely, the split of society into irreconcilable antagonistic classes. Were it not for this split, the self-acting armed organization of the population would differ from the primitive organizations of a stick-wielding herd of monkeys, or of primitive men, or of men united in clans by its complexity, its high technical level, and so on. But such an organization would still be possible. It is impossible because civilized society is split into antagonistic and, moreover, irreconcilably antagonistic classes whose self-acting arming would lead to an armed struggle between them. The state arises, a special power is created, special bodies of armed men, and every revolution, by destroying the state apparatus, shows us the naked class struggle, clearly shows us how the ruling class strives to restore the special bodies of armed men which serve it, and how the oppressed class strives to create a new organization of this kind, capable of serving the exploited instead of the exploiters. It is in the above argument, Engels raises theoretically the very same question which every great revolution raises before us in practice. Palpably. Palp. You gotta palp. What am I saying? Palpably, and what is more, on a scale of mass action, namely, the question of the relationship between special bodies of armed men and self-acting armed organization of the population. We shall see how this question is specific. I'm just imagining a handful of people seeing me go palp, and then see, this is why I didn't want anyone to find these, because now I'm thinking about the idea of people actually seeing these, and I'm like, no. God, no. Let's see. If I can just fucking stick to this, it wouldn't. I'd be done by now. Maybe. Maybe I'm kidding myself. I'm just trying to make it seem worse than it is. In the above argument, Engels raises theoretically the very same question, which palpably. That's it. We got caught. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just yawning, or if I'm making myself yawn. Do you ever wonder that? Do you ever wonder if some of the physical things you do are things that on some level you're leaning into it, you want it to happen, but at the same time it feels or seems also involuntary, or you're used to thinking of it as an involuntary thing, but maybe it's not involuntary. Maybe it really is something that you are somehow responsible for in your own body. I'm not even high and I'm having high thoughts. It's because I'm tired. Um, okay. I mean, also, just to be clear, I get that there's like maybe some reference to. I'm not talking about conversion in the psychoanalytic sense in what I was talking about. I don't think that's what I mean. But anyway. Um, and no, I can't read like that. I want to. In the above argument, Engels raises theoretically the very same question which every great revolution raises before us in practice, palpably, and what is more, on a scale of mass action, namely, the question of the relationship between special bodies of armed men and the special acting armed organization of the population. We shall see how this question is specifically illustrated by the experience of the European and Russian revolutions. But to return to Engels' position, also, I feel like I just did not grasp anything that happened there. I'm going to reread that sentence. Ah! No, my cap. No cap. Why? Why no cap? What happened? Where'd you go? That was my fiddle. That was my fiddler. There it is. Ugh. There's like a very annoying and goofy fucking song that went through my head right now. I will not repeat that. I'm better. I'm bad. I'm better than that. um. In the above argument, Engels raises theoretically the very same question which every great revolution raises before us in practice, palpably, and what is more, on a scale of mass action, namely, the question of the relationship between special bodies of armed men and the self-acting armed organization of the population. Okay, that's like straight up class war. We shall see how this question is specifically illustrated by the experience of the European and Russian revolutions. I mean, I'm sorry, not class war. It's not straight up class war. I mean, it is, but I mean, arguably, class war can actually be a lot of different things. No, but that is like explicit. That's revolution. That's explicit, like militant revolution. That's what he's referring to there. I just imagined, like, what if there was a revolution and for some reason you were like biting on like a club from a police officer? Why do I even think? This is where my mind goes to. I'm just like they've got a billy club and you're just like I'm sorry. What am I doing? I'm starting my ADHD I'm starting back up on my ADHD medication on Monday. Hopefully I will be a lot better about this stupid shit that I say. After next week, but we'll see. It's really kind of an experiment because like medication doesn't fix shit. It just tips some scales in terms of like the way that you experience certain types of conscious states and affect of like yeah. Anyway, doesn't fix problems. Let's see here. I'm sticking my jaw up at the camera. Ooh! Yes, my camera's like way up here. Got an interesting desk setup. Gracie, my fiance, once said, like, I have a very enviable desk setup. And I don't use it to its full potential, like, at all. This is like a fantastic little setup. I've got 2 screens and one's a big old TV monitor shit. So oh man. Okay. In the above argument, okay, no. But to return to Engels' exposition, he points out that sometimes in certain parts of North America, for instance, this public power is weak, in his mind a rare exception in capitalist society. In those parts of North America, as in its pre-imperialist days, where the free colonists predominated, but that generally speaking, it grows stronger. The public power grows stronger, however, in proportion as class antagonisms within the state become more acute and as adjacent states become larger and more populous. We have only to look at a present-day Europe, where class struggle and rivalry is in conquest have turned up the public power to such a pitch that it threatens to swallow the whole of society and even the state. This was written not later than the early 90s of the last century, Engels' last preface being dated June 8, 1891. The turn towards imperialism, meaning the complete domination of the trusts, the omnipotence of the banks, a grand-scale colonial policy, and so forth, was only just beginning in France and was even weaker in North America and Germany. Since then, rivalry in conquest has taken a gigantic stride, all the more because by the beginning of the second decade of the 20th century, the world had been completely divided up among these rivals in conquest, i.e., among the predatory great powers. Since then, military and naval armaments have grown fantastically in the predatory war of 1914 to 1917 for the domination of the world by Great Britain or Germany, for the division of the spoils as brought by the swallowing of all the forces of society by rapacious state power to close to complete catastrophe. Engels could, as early as 1891, point to the rivalry in conquest as one of the most important distinguishing features of the foreign policy of the great powers, while its social chauvinist scoundrels have since 1914, when this rivalry many times intensified, gave rise to an imperialist war, been covering up the defense of the predatory interests of their own bourgeois, with phrases about defense of the fatherland, defense of the republic, and revolution, etc. Wasn't there a part where he, like, compared Kautsky to, um, like, the more subtle Kautsky deviation? Right. Why am I thinking I feel like I missed them somehow. I see. I see. I remember now what Kautsky's position was there. I'll be back. I gotta stand up for a minute. I know I'm just getting distracted again. Oh, there it is, my cap. I'll be back. Okay. I am Bach. Bach, 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 Bach. Where'd my cap? Oh, I left my cap in there. Damn. Okay. The state, an instrument for the exploitation of the oppressed classes. The maintenance of the special public power standing above society requires taxes and state loans. I can fiddle with this. This is very fiddle friendly. We'll see. Maybe it's too distracting. No, yeah. I think this is unfortunately. You can't really see it, but it's this trippy thing right here. Whoa. It's so trippy. Oh, man. How do I get it back? Oh, I'm fucked. I probably shouldn't curse like that. I don't know. Can you curse like that on YouTube? I don't know. Probably. That's probably fine. But I'm like, this was not a good idea. This was a very bad idea. This is probably the worst idea I've had all night. Seriously. Okay. So I just have to stop with this. This is very unsatisfying for me. I just really wanted to get this back to a square before I put it down. And unfortunately, I'm not. There's like so many shapes it is capable of making, a lot of which are not good shapes. They're just like random bullshit shapes that like aren't real shapes. They are not valid shapes. They're invalid shapes. And so I just wanted to get it into like one nice cube-shaped thing, and I could not, unfortunately. And so I am a failure at everything in life. Oh, man. Okay, well, this is at least a sort of satisfying shape, kind of. It's like a pyramid thing. It's not good enough, but it's something. Oh no, I ruined it. Okay, I need to put this down before I just... Oh, that's kind of funny. Anyway. I know if I was just on, if I could just stop getting distracted, I'd have had this done by now, but just move on ahead. Okay. The maintenance of the special public power standing above society requires taxes and state loans. Having public power and the right to levy taxes, Engels writes, the officials now stand as organs of society above society. The free, voluntary respect that was accorded to the clans of Gentile clan constitution does not satisfy them, even if they could gain it. Special laws are enacted proclaiming the sanctity and immunity of the officials. The shabbiest police servant has more authority than the representative of the clan, but even the head of the military power of the civilized state may well envy the elder of the clan the unrestrained respect of society. The question of the privileged position of officials. Do I have bug bites? Oh, I do. Fucking mosquitoes. No. That is the worst. That is the worst. It's goddamn March and the mosquitoes are coming out. That is not fair. That is not fair. The question of the privileged position of the officials as organs of state power is raised here. The main point indicated is, what is it that places them above society? We shall see how this theoretical question was answered in practice by the Paris Commune in 1871, and how it was obscured from a reactionary standpoint by Kautsky in 1912. Because the state arose from the need to hold class antagonisms in check, because the state arose from the need to hold class antagonisms in check, but because it arose at the same time in the midst of the conflict of these classes, it is, as a rule, the state of the most powerful, economically dominant class, which, through the medium of the state, becomes also the politically dominant class. Yeah, economically dominant. Thus acquires a new means of holding down and exploiting the oppressed class. The ancient and feudal states were organs for the exploitation of the slaves and serfs. Likewise, the modern representative state is an instrument of the exploitation of wage labor by capital. By way of exception, however, periods occur in which the warring classes balance each other so nearly that the state power, as ostensible mediator, acquires, for the moment, a certain degree of independence of both. Such were the absolute monarchs in the 17th and 18th century, the Bonapartism of the First and Second Empires in France, and the Bismarck regime in Germany. Such, we may add, is the Kerensky government in Republican Russia since it began to persecute the revolutionary proletariat at a moment when, owing to the leadership of the petty bourgeois Democrats, the Soviets have already become impotent, while the bourgeoisie are not yet strong enough simply to disperse them. Hmm. In a democratic republic, Engels continues, wealth exercises its power indirectly, but all the more surely, first by means of the direct corruption of officials, America. Secondly, by means of an alliance of the government with the stock exchange, France and America. At present, imperialism and the domination of the banks have developed into an exceptional art. Developed into an exceptional art. Both these methods of upholding and giving effect to the omnipotence of wealth in democratic republics of all descriptions. Since, for instance, in the very first months of the Russian Democratic Revolution, one might say during the honeymoon of the socialists, SRs and Mensheviks joined in wedlock to the bourgeoisie in the coalition government. Mr. Palachinsky obstructed every measure intended for curbing the capitalists and their marauding practices, their plundering of the state by means of war contracts. And since later on, Mr. Palachinsky, upon resigning from the cabinet and being, of course, replaced by another quite similar Palachinsky, was rewarded by the capitalists with a lucrative job with a salary of 120,000 rubles per annum. What would you call that? Direct or indirect bribery? An alliance of the government and the syndicates, or merely friendly relations? What roles do the Chernovs, Tseretelis, Avksentievs, Skoblevs play? Are they direct or only indirect allies of the millionaire treasury looters? Another reason why the omnipotence of wealth is more certain in a democratic republic is that it does not depend on defects in the political machinery or in the faulty political shell of capitalism. A democratic republic is the best possible political shell for capitalism, and therefore, once capital has gained possession of this very best shell through the Palachinskys, Chernovs, Tseretelis, and company, it establishes its power so securely, so firmly, that no change of persons, institutions, or parties in the bourgeois democratic republic can shake it. We must also note that Engels is most explicit in calling universal suffrage as well an instrument of bourgeois rule. Universal suffrage, he says, obviously taking account of the long experience of the German German social democracy, is you must we must also note that Engels is most explicit in calling universal suffrage as well an instrument of bourgeois rule. Universal suffrage, he says, obviously taking account of the long experience of the German social democracy, is the gauge of the maturity of the working class. It cannot and never will be anything more in the present day state. The petty bourgeois Democrats, such as our socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks and their twin brothers, all social chauvinists and opportunists of the Western Europe, expect just this more from universal suffrage. They themselves share and instill into the minds of the people the false notion that universal suffrage in the present day state is really capable of revealing the will of the majority of the working people and of securing its realization. Here we can only indicate this false notion, only point out that Engels' perfectly clear statement is distorted at every step in the propaganda and agitation of the official, i.e., opportunist, socialist parties. A detailed exposure of the utter falsity of this notion, which Engels brushes aside here, is given in our further account of the views of Marx and Engels on the present day state. Engels gives a general summary of his view in the most popular of his works in the following words. The state then has not existed from all eternity. There have been societies that did without it and had no idea of the state and state power. At a certain stage of economic development, which was necessarily bound up with the split of society into classes, the state became a necessity owing to this split. We are now rapidly approaching a stage in the development of production at which the existence of these classes not only will have ceased to be a necessity, but will become a positive hindrance to production. They will fall as they arose at the earlier stage. Along with them, the state will inevitably fall. Society, which will reorganize production on the basis of a free and equal association of the producers, will put the whole machinery of the state where it will then belong, into a museum of antiquities, by the side of the spinning wheel and the bronze axe. We do not often come across this passage in the propaganda and agitation literature of the present-day social democrats. Even when we do come across it, it is almost quoted in the same manner as one bows before an icon, i.e., it is done to show official respect for Engels, and no attempt is made to gauge the breadth and depth of the revolution that this relegating of the whole machinery of state to a museum of antiquities implies. In most cases, we do not even find the understanding of what Engels calls the state machine. Section 4. The withering away of the state and violent revolution. I remember when I used to have dreams of violent revolution. I remember when I used to imagine the idea of dying in the streets in the support of the revolution, of sabotaging the police or doing some other crazy thing like that. I mean, I still believe in the idea of being willing to sacrifice yourself for a cause, but in the present day conditions, it seems those fantasies were a way of avoiding the reality of a deeply apolitical historical period. As well as of imbuing my life with a certain type of magical quality. The quality of having a kind of destiny. Changing the world can become quite a beautiful fantasy. But it can also be just a fantasy tied into your own ego and your life and the way that you want to view it, the lack of meaning in it. Not that I'm opposed to such a fantasy. I should only hope that the fantasy of being some great figure in the coming revolution amounts to more than merely talking about it, which is the problem I had. I had people who, upon hearing me describe class conflict, exploitation, and the overthrow of the state and the possibility of a horizontal egalitarian society, upon hearing it, they'd be like, wow, well, I really believe in you, and I hope you do it. And then I'd be like, wait, me? What about you? uh, well, thoughts for another time. Unanswered questions to consider in a better time. Let's continue. The withering away of the state in violent revolution. Engels' words regarding the withering away of the state are so widely known, they are often quoted and so clearly reveal the essence of the customary adaptation of Marxism to opportunism that we must deal with them in detail. We shall quote the whole argument from which they are taken. The proletariat seizes from state power and turns the means of production into state property to begin with. Hold on. The proletariat seizes from state power and turns the means of production into state property to begin with. But thereby it abolishes itself as the proletariat, abolishes all class distinctions and class antagonisms, and abolishes also the state as the state. Society thus far operating amid class antagonisms needed the state, that is, an organization of the particular exploiting class for the maintenance of its external conditions and production, and therefore especially for the purpose of forcibly keeping the exploited class in the conditions of oppression determined by the given mode of production, slavery, serfdom, or bondage, wage labor. The state was the official representative of society as a whole. Its concentration in a visible corporation, but it was this only insofar as it was the state that class which itself represented. For its own time, society as a whole. For its own time, society as a whole. In ancient times, the state of slave-owning the state of slave-owning citizens. In the Middle Ages, the feudal nobility. In our own times, the bourgeoisie. When at last it becomes the real representative of the whole of society, it renders itself unnecessary. As soon as there is no longer any social class to be held in subjection, as soon as class rule and the individual struggle for existence based upon the present anarchy in production, with the collisions and excesses arising from this struggle, are As soon as there is no longer any social class to be held in subjection, as soon as class rule and the individual's struggle for existence based on the present anarchy and production, with the collision and excesses arising from this struggle, are removed, nothing more remains to be held in subjection. Nothing necessitating a special coercive force, the state. The first act by which the state really comes forward as the representative of the whole of society, the taking possession of the means of production in the name of society, is also its last independent act as a state. State interference in social relations becomes, in one domain after another, superfluous and then dies down of itself. The government of persons is replaced by the administration of things, and by the conduct of processes of production. The state is not abolished, it withers away. This gives the measure of the value of the phrase "a free people's state," both as to its justifiable use for a long time from the agitational point of view, and as to its ultimate scientific insufficiency, and also the so-called anarchist demand that the state be abolished overnight. It is safe to say that of this argument of Engels, which is remarkably rich in ideas, only one point became an integral part of socialist thought among modern socialist parties, namely that according to Marx, the state withers away, as distinct from the anarchist doctrine of the abolition of the state. To prune Marxism to such an extent means reducing it to opportunism, for this interpretation only leaves a vague notion of a slow, even gradual change, of absence of leaps and storms, of absence of revolution. The current widespread, popular, if one may say so, conception of the withering away of the state undoubtedly means obscuring, if not repudiating, revolution. Such an interpretation, however, is the crudest distortion of Marxism, advantageous only to the bourgeoisie. In the point of theory, it is based on disregard for the most important circumstances and considerations indicated in, say, Engels' summary, again, argument we have just quoted in full. In the first place, at the very outset of his argument, Engels says that in seizing state power, the proletariat thereby abolishes the state as state. It is not done to ponder over the meaning of this. Generally, it is either ignored altogether or is considered to be something in the nature of Hegelian weakness on Engels' part. As a matter of fact, however, these words briefly express the experience of one of the greatest proletarian revolutions in the Paris Commune of 1871, and which we shall speak in greater detail in its proper place. As a matter of fact, Engels speaks here of the proletarian revolution abolishing the bourgeois state, while the words about the state withering away refer to the remnants of the proletarian state after the socialist revolution. According to Engels, the bourgeois state does not wither away, but is abolished by the proletariat in the course of the revolution. What withers away after this revolution is the proletarian state, or semi-state. That's a good distinction to make. Those are some really good distinctions to make. Those are good clarifications. Good clarifications. Very interesting. Secondly, the state is a special coercive force. Engels gives this splendid and extremely profound definition here with the utmost lucidity. And from it follows that the special coercive force for the suppression of the proletariat by the bourgeoisie of millions of working people by handfuls of the rich must be replaced by a special coercive force for the suppression of the bourgeoisie by the proletariat, the dictatorship of the proletariat. This is precisely what is meant by abolition of the state as state. This is precisely the act of taking possession of the means of production in the name of society. And it is self-evident that such a replacement of one bourgeois special force by another proletarian special force cannot possibly take place in the form of withering away. Thirdly, in speaking of the state withering away and the even more graphic and colorful dying down of itself, Engels refers quite clearly and definitively to the period after the state has taken possession of the means of production in the name of the whole society, that is, after the Socialist Revolution. We all know that the political form of the state at that time is the most uh, complete democracy. But it never enters the head of any of the opportunists who shamelessly distort Marxism that Engels is consequently speaking here of democracy dying down of itself or withering away. This seems very strange at first sight, but it is incomprehensible only to those who have not thought about democracy also being a state and, consequently, also disappearing when the state disappears. Revolution alone can abolish the bourgeois state. The state in general, i.e., the most complete democracy, can only wither away. Interesting. Fourthly, after formulating his famous proposition that the state withers away, Engels at once explains specifically that this proposition is directed against both the opportunists and the anarchists. In doing this, Engels puts in the forefront that conclusion, drawn from the proposition that the state withers away, which is directed against the opportunists. One can wager that out of every 10,000 persons who have read or heard about the withering away of the state, 9,990 are completely unaware or do not remember that Engels directed his conclusions from the proposition not against anarchists alone, and of the remaining 10, probably 9 do not know the meaning of a free people's state, or why an attack on this slogan means an attack on opportunists. This is how history is written. This is how a great revolutionary teaching is imperceptibly falsified and adapted to prevailing Philistinism. The conclusion directed against the anarchists has been repeated thousands of times. It has been vulgarized and rammed into people's heads in the shallowest form, and has acquired the strength of a prejudice, whereas the conclusion directed against the opportunists has been obscured and forgotten. The Free People, the Free People's State was a program, demand, and a catchword current among the German Social Democrats in the 70s. This catchword is devoid of all political content except that it describes the concept of democracy in a pompous Philistine fashion, insofar as it is hinted in a legally permissible manner at a democratic republic. Engels was prepared to justify its use for a time from an agitational point of view. But it was an opportunist catchword, for it amounted to nothing more than the prettyifying of bourgeois democracy, and was also a failure to understand the socialist criticism of the state in general. We are in favor of a democratic republic as the best form of state for the proletariat under capitalism. But we have no right to forget that wage slavery is the lot of the people even in the most democratic bourgeois republic. Furthermore, every state is a special force for the suppression of the oppressed class. Consequently, every state is not free and not a people's state. Marx and Engels explained this repeatedly to their party comrades in the 70s. Fifthly, the same work of Engels, whose arguments about the withering away of the state everyone remembers, also contains an argument about of the significance of violent revolution. Engels' historical analysis of its role becomes a veritable panegyric on violent revolution. This no one remembers. It is not done in modern socialist parties to talk or even think about the significance of this idea, and it plays no part whatever in their daily propaganda and agitation among the people. And yet it is inseparably bound up with the withering away of the state into one harmonious whole. Here is Engels' argument. That force, however, plays yet another role, other than that of a diabolical power, in history, a revolutionary role, that is, in the words of Marx, it is the midwife of every old society which is pregnant with a new one. That it is the instrument with which a social movement forces its way through and shatters the dead, fossilized political forms. Of this there is not a word in her during. It is only with sighs and groans that he admits the possibility that force will perhaps be necessary for the overthrow of an economy based on exploitation. Unfortunately, because all of the force demoralizes, he says, the person who uses it, and this in Germany, where a violent collision, which may after all be forced on the people, would at least have the advantage of wiping out the civility which has penetrated the nation's mentality following the humiliation of the 30 years of war. And this person's mode of thought, dull, insipid, and impotent, presumes to impose itself on the most revolutionary party the history has ever known. That's me. I'm dull, insipid, and impotent as a thinker. Um, I'm not gonna cut that out, but like, I don't know if that's true. I'd like to think it's not. Probably is. I'm trying. I'm doing my best here. It's a lie. That's a bold lie. Maybe. How can this panegyric on violent revolution, which Engels insists brought to the attention of the German Social Democrats between 1878 and 1894, i.e., right up to the time of his death, be combined with the theory of the withering away of the state to form a single theory? Usually the two are combined by means of eclecticism, by an unprincipled or sophistic selection made arbitrarily or to please the powers that be, or of first one, then another argument, and in 99 cases out of 100, if not more, it is the idea of the withering away that is placed in the forefront. Dialectics are replaced by eclecticism. This is the most usual and most widespread practice to be met with in present-day official social democratic literature in relation to Marxism. This sort of substitution is, of course, nothing new. It was observed even in the history of classical Greek philosophy. In falsifying Marxism in opportunist fashion, the substitution of eclecticism for dialectics is the easiest way of deceiving people. It gives an illusory satisfaction. It seems to take into account all sides of the process, all trends of development, all the conflicting influences, and so forth, whereas in reality, it provides no integral and revolutionary conception of the process of social development at all. Sounds like by eclecticism, in reference to the Greeks, it sounds like what Lenin is kind of getting at is what is a classical issue in philosophy as the issue of relativism, which is, this works for you and this works for me and this works for them and this all just sort of works by its on for each other in our own way. Your truth, my truth, your good, my good, your evil, my evil. It's all good in the hood. No, just oh my god. Someone just shoot me. Okay. Okay. Almost done. Almost done. Ooh, with this chapter. With this chapter. Well, come Monday, we'll see. I shall be a titan of concentration. I shall have this complete for us. I'm looking at myself to make sure that I look as good and as stupid as I think I do, or as I want to. We have already said above, and shall show more fully later, that the theory of Marx and Engels of the inevitability of a violent revolution refers to the bourgeois state. The latter cannot be superseded by the proletarian state, the dictatorship of the proletariat, through the process of withering away, but, as a general rule, only through a violent revolution. The panegyric Engels saying in its honor, and which fully corresponds to Marx's repeated statements with the concluding passages of The Poverty of Philosophy and the Communist Manifesto, with their proud and open proclamation of the inevitability of a violent revolution, see what Marx wrote nearly 30 years later, in criticizing the Gotha program of 1875, when he mercilessly castigates the opportunist character of that program. This panegyric is by no means a mere impulse, a mere declamation, or a polemic sally. I want to meet polemic Sally. Anyway, the necessity of systematically imbuing the masses with this and precisely this view of violent revolution. Wait, hold on. The necessity of systematically imbuing the masses with this and precisely this view of violent revolution lies at the root of the entire theory of Marx and Engels. The betrayal of their theory by the now prevailing social chauvinist and Kautskyite trends expresses itself strikingly in both of these trends, ignoring such propaganda and agitation. In both these trends, ignoring such. The supersession of the bourgeois state by the proletarian state is impossible without a violent revolution. The abolition of the proletarian state, i.e., of the state in general, is impossible except through the process of withering away. A detailed and concrete elaboration of these views was given by Marx and Engels when they studied each particular revolutionary situation, when they analyzed the lessons of the experience of each particular revolution. We shall now pass to this, undoubtedly the most important part of their theory. Oh my God. Look at this. We did it. We completed. Oh, there's all these endnotes. I'm not going to read them. I'm not going to read them. At least I'm not going to read them here in the like this. So the next is the experience of 1848 to 1851. And all of that. That's cool. I'm looking forward to that. I really do. I complain a lot in some of these streams, but I really do like reading this stuff. It is cool to me. I do enjoy it. I do think it's interesting. I do think it's valuable. Anyway, I'm done. I'm done. I did it. I did at least what I set out for myself to do. I completed one of these. I could probably have done it faster if I wasn't so tired, if it wasn't so late at night. It's not that late at night. I've just started going to bed earlier, so now it feels late at night. But yeah, what do you know? Okay, so I'm done here, and I guess I'm gonna head out. Peace.